Today, I'm going to be doing possibly the hardest ranking video I have ever done. I've ranked a few arcs, I've ranked my top 10 series of all time, but this video is probably going to be the hardest ranking I've done, because when you are given a masterpiece of a series like Berserk, and someone asks you to rank your favorite chapters from 10 to 1, it's pretty hard, especially considering there are 364 chapters in Berserk. So, of course, because when you don't have video ideas and when you feel like making ranking videos and not really scripting any videos, you decide that you're going to do one of the hardest ranking videos you could possibly do. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I just want to mention that while this is my top 10 Berserk chapters, literally all of these can go back and forth. The entire list can literally be flipped over and I'd be completely fine with it, except for maybe the top 1 and 2. Those two are going to be at number 1 and 2 pretty much always, but the rest of the list can basically be flipped over many times. It can be in almost any order you want it to be in. I just put it in this order because I kind of had to for the sake of this video. Let me know in the comments if you're up for this task to actually rank your top 10 chapters of Berserk. I'm really curious to see because it's Berserk. Every chapter is a masterpiece, so I'm curious to see what you have in the comment section below. Alright, so this is a top 10 ranking, so as usual, I'm going to give a few honorable mentions that were very close to making it onto the top 10 list, but unfortunately they just barely didn't make it. Chapter 180, Unchanged, chapters 46 and 47, Wounds chapter 1 and 2 are 3 chapters that I honestly think could very easily be on this list, but unfortunately they just barely didn't make it into this ranking. Alright, another video with like a 3-minute intro, but it is what it is. Let's just get into the actual top 10 ranking. So we're starting off strong with chapter 78 named Parting. You're gonna notice that this video has quite a few chapters from the Eclipse. I mean, it's pretty obvious that I'm gonna have a few chapters from the Eclipse, but automatically I'm going to start off with this chapter. And this is the chapter where Griffith ultimately sacrifices the entire band of the Hawk. This is the chapter where he commits, well actually not really where he commits that crime, but this is the chapter where Griffith ends up sacrificing the entire band of the Hawk for power. This is the biggest decision in the entire story. And what the chapter allowed us, the reader, to see is Griffith's actual intentions. We knew who Griffith was from the first arc in the story. We knew what he would end up becoming, but this is the chapter where everything starts to actually shape up and we begin to see where the story was in the Black Swordsman arc. I find it so crazy how Miura wrote this in a way where it seemed like he planned Griffith's entire character, not only up until this moment, but until the end of the entire story. There's so much foreshadowing towards this moment and there's so much build-up and tension, resulting in one of the greatest climaxes I've ever seen in a series. Jumping over 200 chapters later into the story, at number 9 we have Bubbles of Futility, or chapter 287. To be honest, this chapter is one of those where when you throw on Guts' theme and you just slowly scroll through and read through, it's one of those chapters that kind of gets you emotional and gives you chills basically every time you read it. I mean, Bubbles of Futility was just a beautiful chapter to sum it up. This is a chapter where Guts comes to the realization once again that the times that he had once had with Casca and the Band of the Hawk will never truly be back again. And this journey that he is currently on is for the sake of somewhat bringing those times back. But in this chapter, Guts kind of comes to the realization that things will ultimately never be back to the way they were no matter what he does, and that even if he somehow does save Casca, things will not be the same. And this also foreshadows what happens in some of the final chapters of the series where Casca regains her memories, but it's ultimately not the same as it once was because Guts can't see her again due to PTSD. So Miura honestly probably foreshadowed that in this chapter. I like the idea of how when Guts is talking about how things cannot be the way they really were, he looks at his left arm and his left arm that he no longer has, and a small little panel of the prosthetic arm that he has is showed. And I feel like what this kind of shows is that no matter how he tries to replace that arm, it's never really going to come back to how it was, which is exactly what he says in the panel under it. This chapter was overall an incredibly emotional and beautifully crafted chapter. Okay. Listen up. I know this was the most recent chapter. I know this was the final chapter of Berserk, but I had to put in chapter 364, A Tear Like Morning Dew. Now, not only is this chapter the final chapter created by the legendary Kentaro Miura, but it was one that was special to me and I'm sure many other people. It's kind of the first time we finally get to see Guts at peace post-eclipse. It's the first time we really get to see him asking himself what he's gonna do next with his life, and we also see the entire crew, everyone we've been traveling with over these past hundreds of chapters, just come together and kind of like a family just bond. It's an absolutely beautiful chapter, and it's an amazing way to finish off Miura's work in Berserk. And I mean, I can't even deny the fact that the cliffhanger with the Griffith panel is just a brutal but perfect cliffhanger to end the story that Miura created. I mean, that ending panel has now probably become one of the most iconic panels in all of Berserk, and it was like the most recent panel in the entire story. But yeah, it may be the most recent chapter, but in my opinion, it was honestly one of the best chapters that Berserk has to offer. Oh boy, okay, let's talk about emotions, cause this chapter gave me a lot of different ones. I don't even know where to really start with this chapter because there was just so much going on. I mean, you have the reunion between Rickert and Griffith. You have Griffith actually talking for the first time in his new body. And I mean, first of all, he's at the grave where the Band of the Hawk died, and supposedly he didn't care for the Band of the Hawk, so it's honestly shocking to see him here. And of course, the best part of it all was Guts coming into contact with Griffith again for the first time in however many years it's been since they saw each other in the eclipse. The tension between the two characters, as well as just Guts dashing towards Griffith with so much rage, just creates an incredibly tense moment, and it's also where we get to see and confirm that Griffith no longer feels any emotions for the Band of the Hawk, as in this chapter he says to Guts that he is free, meaning that he's free from all emotions towards the Band of the Hawk that he himself killed. And of course, the end of the chapter is Zod interfering, and what comes after this is Guts versus Zod round 2, which was absolutely an exhilarating fight to say the least. Yeah, you probably saw it coming. It's a classic. I have to put in Campfire of Dreams or chapter 22 because this chapter is absolutely iconic. The metaphor of the Campfire of Dreams is one of the ones that I truly love from Berserk, and Miura creates such beautiful monologues for Guts especially, and this is just one of them. You know, when Guts talks about life, it's going to be a freaking amazing chapter, and especially because this chapter kind of builds a relationship between Guts and Casca, it makes for an even better one. I mean, even if you don't read Berserk and you read what Guts says in these panels, you will understand why I have it so high on this list, because it's truly just a beautiful thing. And the end of the conversation is just perfect, as Guts says he's going to leave the Band of the Hawks. I feel like it was a perfect ending to that conversation, and it's ultimately what leads everyone down the path of causality, as the God Hand would say. This just shows why the Golden Age is, in my opinion, the greatest arc in fiction. It's because of monologues like this and because of beautiful character interactions and character moments like this one. Yes, another chapter where Guts and Griffith exchange words, except this time they also exchange swords. Now, these are two chapters I technically put into one, being Morning Departure Part 2 and Part 3, but I put them together because they're pretty much interchangeable and they basically represent the same thing. I don't know how I could not have this chapter here. It's so iconic, and it's the only time we ever really get to see Guts and Griffith go all out, except obviously at the beginning of the story, but this is where they're both almost evenly matched. Actually, I can't really even say that because Guts absolutely destroyed Griffith, but the point is that this fight was one of the most important moments in the entire story. Such a tense moment and such a suspenseful moment, and it was a beautiful interaction between all the characters, seeing how Casca changed her feelings towards Guts and trying to get in their way to stop them, as well as Griffith and how he truly had the intent to kill Guts. And how could I not talk about the final panel in Morning Departure Part 2? It's alright. It's like stumbling on a rock on the roadside. It's petty, a small thing. The place you want to go is far more distant, farther off. So it's alright. You'll stand up and you'll start walking. So I guess you can now tell how much I really love Guts' self-talk and his mental struggles, because as you can see, next I have chapters 187 and 188, Winter Journey Part 1 and Part 2. There is so much to say about these chapters. You have the Beast of Darkness coming out and actually talking to Guts, showing what his probably unconscious truly desires and what his inner darkness really wants. And it's an incredible struggle between Guts and his inner demons. As cliche as that might sound, it's truly a beautiful thing. And it's something so simple, and yet it's done so perfectly in Berserk. Some of these panels are just absolutely heartbreaking. Again, it's one of those times where Guts really starts to think about how the past was, and he starts realizing that the present will never truly come back to how it really was. I was prepared. I knew a journey wouldn't be easy with the two of us branded. It's not just the rigors of travel. It goes far beyond a personal war, fighting to protect someone. And it's not just about completely protecting Casca, because my death will result in her death. I'm used to fighting to survive, but what grows worse daily is the pressure not to die. Have I ever before wielded a sword so heavy? I think that speaks for itself. These two chapters were brilliant. I made a video a while ago talking about why I think Griffith is the perfect antagonist. Yeah, well, this chapter is basically half of that reason. Okay, I'm obviously exaggerating, but the point is that the castle, or chapter 77, was truly an exceptional display of what Kentaro Miura can do with the character of Griffith. This chapter really shows you who Griffith was from birth, and that this action that he ends up committing in the eclipse is completely in his character, even from the beginning of the story, and that it was foreshadowed from the very start. It's so well done that, to be honest, I don't think I can put it into words how good it really is. We've known from the beginning of Griffith's character that his goal was to essentially get his own kingdom, but what this chapter does is show us his path to getting the kingdom. And the path that none of us have seen is truly the path that Griffith walks, and he himself didn't even realize this. If I apologize, everything will come to an end. I'll never get to reach that place. And this panel, in my opinion, is one of the greatest in all of Berserk, as the Tower of Corpses is one of the most powerful metaphors for Griffith's character, and is mainly the reason why I have this chapter so high. Okay, so the next two should be pretty self-explanatory. I mean, I feel like if you're gonna make a top 10 chapter list, although it can vary in many ways, these two are almost always on it, and that is chapter 130, A Feeble Flame. This was, for me, one of the most emotionally impactful and, I guess, important chapters in the entire story, because this is where Guts changes his entire purpose in life, and it's where he changes his goal from destroying Griffith to saving the one thing that he still has left. The last feeble flame that he had left was Casca, and that's what really allowed him to not be consumed by the black flame. And as he slowly realizes that he abandoned the one thing he had left, he tells himself that he will not ever lose her again, and thus creates an extremely strong conviction that lasts for the entire story. Last, and certainly not least, my favorite chapter of Berserk is the one that comes right before this one, and that's chapter 129, Cracks in the Blade. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory why I have cracks in the blade this high, but in case you don't know, this is the chapter that kind of taught me a lot, actually. Like, it really manages to teach you what hatred really is and what sorrow really is. And I talked about metaphors a lot in this video, but truly, the metaphor of the blade being dipped into blood to heal the nicks in the blade is like probably the best metaphor in all of Berserk, though it's hard to say that because there's so many amazing ones. And this line that Godo says right here is probably the most powerful line that I've read in like anything. And it says, "The thing about hatred, it's the place where people who can't look sorrow in the eye without wavering run off to." Truly, this was a masterful chapter. It was a chapter that should honestly be a lesson in a philosophy class or something, because it truly is able to teach you a lot about your own emotions. And did I mention how important this is for Guts' character? I mean, this chapter was truly just an eye-opening and breathtaking chapter. There is no other way to explain it but that, and that is why I have it at number 1. My god, that was a long video to record and a difficult one to plan at that. But if you did enjoy, I do appreciate you for watching this far into the video. If you did like it, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And drop a comment letting me know what your top 10 chapters in Berserk are, if you can even manage to rank such greatness from 1 to 10. But that's it for me. Take care and peace.